Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Wrath of the Lich King, the last true Blizzard game ever created, and what many consider the best WoW expansion of all time. And we're going to be comparing the best tank class in this video. We're going to be considering things like AOE threat generation, single target threat, the health pool, physical damage reduction, as well as magical damage mitigation. And we're going to go class by class, discussing the strengths, weaknesses, new abilities, new talents, and at the end we're going to rank them. Also, I want to add that we're going to be looking at patch 3.3.5a, the last patch of Wrath of the Lich King, since that's the patch we will likely get in a Wrath of the Lich King Classic release. But before we dive in, I want to talk very quickly about Blizzard's Wrath of the Lich King design philosophy for tanks to set the proper context. So, what Blizzard wanted was for all four tank classes to be viable. They wanted to achieve as much parity as they possibly could among the four tanks without making them feel too similar. If every single guild wanted the same class as their main tank, then Blizzard would have considered that a failure. What they really wanted to achieve was tanking flavors, as you might put it, and wanted to be very careful when they implemented this because they didn't want certain tanks to only be used for certain encounters. For example, if druids had gigantic health pools but lower mitigation and avoidance than a warrior, that would be tanking flavor. It would mean that you heal the bears a little bit different. They might drain more mana, but the damage would be more predictable. In really long fights, the warrior might have an advantage over the bear tank. In a fight where a boss hit very quickly for less damage, the warrior with armor would have an advantage there over other tanks. In fights with periods of high burst damage, the druid might have an advantage with that large health pool. In magic fights where armor was less of a factor, then once again that druid with lower armor might have an advantage. Now, this is just one example. Blizzard's overriding concern was making sure that the tanks have the tools, the threat generation, and damage mitigation that they needed to tank, and their secondary concern being making sure that the tanks don't feel too similar. Now, with that context provided, let's talk a little bit about the Protection Paladin. Now, many people believe that Ardent Defender, which is a talent that Protection Paladins get, is the most overpowered passive ability in the history of pretty much World of Warcraft in Wrath of the Lich King. Now, what Ardent Defender does is it is a passive that says damage that takes you below 35% health is reduced by 20%. In addition, attacks which would otherwise kill you cause you to be healed by up to 30% of your maximum health amount healed based on defense. This healing effect cannot occur more than once every 2 minutes. So it is a effect that is passively always on you. If you were to die, you would not die and instead be healed for 1/3 of your maximum health, and that's incredible because you still have that 20% reduced damage if you're below 35% health. So this passive alone, which can happen more than once if it, 2-minute internal cooldown, it's incredible. Many people think this alone made Paladins one of the best tanks, but we're going to talk about more than just this. But this passive, just want to get it out right front and center, makes Paladins very strong. Now, Protection Paladins also have some nice support abilities for the entire raid, like Divine Sacrifice, 30% of all damage taken by party members within 30 yards redirected to the Paladin, to a maximum of 40% of the Paladin's health. It will not kill the Paladin. They also have Lay on Hands. They have Hand of Protection, etc., all the blessings. Paladins also have the advantage of damage over time in the form of Consecration and Seal of Vengeance. They also have excellent threat generation from Avenger's Shield, which is instant cast in Wrath of the Lich King. Now, Consecration, of course, being the great AOE threat generator for Paladins with unlimited targets. As long as a mob is standing in the Consecration, they will take damage. There's no maximum number of mobs that will be taking that damage. Avenger's Shield, of course, we talked about. This is going to scale with your holy power and attack power, affecting up to 3 total targets that will daze them and jumps around. A big talent for Protection Paladins is Spiritual Attunement. This is a passive ability that gives the Paladin mana when healed by other friendly target spells. The amount of mana gain is equal to 10% of the amount healed. That really helps with mana issues. But a new spell was added in Wrath of the Lich King called Divine Plea. You gain 25% of your total mana over 15 seconds. Your healing is reduced by 50% during this duration with a 1-minute cooldown. So clearly this is a very nice Protection Paladin spell because you're not really casting heals on yourself while you're tanking. 25% of your mana can be used in a desperation situation where you need that mana back. Very, very awesome addition to further help with Protection Paladin mana issues. Now, another ability was added to Protection Paladins called Shield of Righteousness. Slam the target with your shield, causing holy damage based on block value plus an additional 520. This is excellent to help with single target threat generation, which Paladins I think would definitely appreciate. It's a nice addition. And they also have Hammer of the Righteous. Hammer the current target and up to 2 additional nearby targets, causing 4 times your main hand damage per second as holy damage. This is an incredible new ability at the bottom of the protection tree, which helps once again with multiple targets. I actually remember there was a period of Wrath of the Lich King where Protection Paladin was incredibly overpowered in Arena. Just as an aside, I remember one-shotting many warriors in Arena as a Protection Paladin, but I'm going to keep this to tanking. It was good times back then. Now, there's actually a revamped Seal of Command ability that tanks sometimes use. So Seal of Command, when used with attacks or abilities that strike a single target, additional holy damage will strike up to 2 additional targets. So that is if you have Seal of Command on, so it's slightly different. Now able to hit multiple targets. Now, of course, Paladin tanks do have another advantage over other tanks with the ability to use Holy Wrath and Exorcism to pick up demon and undead mobs, which is a nice benefit. Paladins are also the only tanking class to use mana while actively tanking, and that can be a vulnerability if they are mana burned aggressively. Only Paladins use spells when tanking, and all spells are from the Holy School of Magic, so silence and interrupt effects mainly will hurt Paladin tanks. Hand of Reckoning is a new single target taunt. Taunts the target to attack you. If the target is not currently attacking you, it will also cause holy damage. Also, as a plate-wearing tank, they have very good physical damage reduction. Overall, an extremely powerful tank that many would argue is the best tank in the game, in part due to the revamped Ardent Defender talent. Okay, let's move on to the Protection Warrior. Now, many Protection Warriors will tell you that this is the most fun tank class to play. Warbringer, which is a talent, causes your charge, intercept, and intervene abilities to be usable in any stance. In addition, intervene will remove all movement impairing effects on use. So this gives you the ability to bounce around wherever you're needed, pretty much better than any other tank. They've got great mobility, and of course, if you are knocked back, it allows you to quickly return to that mob that knocked you back or go somewhere else. Warriors also finally have an answer for AOE Threat building, which is the new talent at the end of the protection tree called Shockwave. This is a cone ability that you cast in front of you. It stuns all enemy targets within 10 yards for 4 seconds. Of course, would generate threat there. Very nice ability, very useful. Of course, you do have to line things up right, and it's sort of a linear cone in front of you. The 20-second cooldown, of course, it's not as accessible as, say, a Paladin's 9-second cooldown Consecrate, but still something that can hit and stun all enemy targets, which is what Warriors desperately needed. Also, Warriors have a great ranged aggro building ability, which can be used to pull, called Heroic Throw. 1-minute cooldown, throws your weapon at the enemy, causing high threat. Vigilance is a great threat management and protective talent for Warriors to use. It essentially reduces damage taken by a target by 3% and transfers 10% of any threat they cause to you. Anytime that target is hit by an attack, your taunt is the taunt refreshes cooldown. This lasts 30 minutes, can only be on one target at a time. This is very powerful. So a skilled warrior can use this to have close to no cooldown on taunt. So very, very powerful, actually. Of course, Warriors also bring the staples of Demoralizing Shout and Thunderclap to reduce melee attack power, as well as increase time between attacks, respectively. Warriors have an AoE taunt ability called Challenging Shout, which actually has a 3-minute cooldown in Wrath of the Lich King, which also once again helps with AoE threat generation. Only Warriors have the ability to reflect spells with Spell Reflect, and also as a plate-wearing tank, they have great physical damage reduction. Warrior tanks are also known for their very powerful defensive cooldowns, Last Stand, Shield Wall, Shield Block, which increases your block chance by 100%, which is incredible. And that is the warrior. Let's move on to the blood death knight. Now, death knights operate off of runic power, which is very similar to rage. It sort of decays over time, but as runic power is lost, the death knight's other resource, runes, are restored. Death knights are known for having large health pools and especially strong anti-magic abilities and passives, and this is sort of their distinctive flavor. One such is spell deflection. It's a talent which gives you a chance equal to your parry chance of taking 45% less damage from a direct damage spell. So this is passive. This is always happening. It's almost like you are parrying a spell. Very, very cool and very, very strong anti-magic damage reduction. Another ability that all Death Knights have is called Anti-Magic Shell. It surrounds the Death Knight in Anti-Magic Shell, absorbing 75% of the damage dealt by harmful spells, up to a max of 50% of the Death Knight's health, and preventing application of harmful magical effects. This is incredible, and by the way, any damage absorbed energizes the Death Knight with additional runic power. It only lasts 5 seconds, but it only has a 45-second cooldown, and it is incredibly powerful magic damage reduction ability. Now, another strong passive, which is actually shockingly similar to Paladin's Ardent Defender, is called Will of the Necropolis. Damage that would take you below 35% health, or taken while you are at 35% health, is reduced by 15%. Of course, not as powerful as Ardent Defender, but it has a little bit of that when you're low health, get additional damage reduction flavor. Very, very nice passive ability. Now, Death Knights also have Army of the Dead, which is surprisingly a defensive cooldown. Summons a legion of ghouls to fight for you. While the Death Knight is channeling, the Death Knight takes less damage equal to dodge plus parry chance. So pretty nice there. I didn't actually know about that one until I looked it up. Raise Ally is not actually a battle res. That happened in patch 4.1.0, which was actually in Cataclysm. In Wrath of the Lich King, this spell literally just raises your ally as a ghoul for 5 minutes, and it has a couple of mediocre abilities usable on a vehicle bar. Bloodworms is a very cool talent for Blood Death Knights, which cause your weapon hits to have a 9% chance to cause the target to spawn 2 to 4 bloodworms. Bloodworms attack your enemies, healing you as they do damage for 20 seconds or until killed. There's also Mark of Blood. Whenever the marked enemy deals damage to a target, the target is healed for 4% of its maximum health. That's quite good as well. Blood Boil is essentially all enemies within 10 yards take shadow damage, more effective with diseases, so very, very good AOE threat generation. Rune Tap is a 1-minute cooldown ability which converts a blood rune to 10% or 20% of your max health, depending if you talent into it. So you can kind of see here a trend. There's a lot of self-healing going on with Blood Death Knights, and there's also a lot of magic damage mitigation. And this is sort of the Death Knight flavor, self-healing and very resistant to magic. And of course, they also wear plate, so they have quite good physical damage reduction as well. Overall, a very, very strong tank class with a lot of fun flavor. Of course, the new hero class Death Knight, so a lot of fun to be had there. And last but not least, we have the Feral Druid. Now, Druids have AoE Taunt, which they can combine with their Thorns buff to have very strong establishment of AoE Threat. They have notoriously large health pools, as we talked early on, and they can use that to soak damage, magic damage very well, or just burst damage. And this is sort of their flavor because Druids have a naturally lower armor value than the plate-wearing classes. Now, Dire Bear Form, which increases attack power by 120 and also increases armor contribution from cloth and leather by 370%, as well as stamina by 25%, gives druids that additional armor. Many say it's sort of equivalent to if they were wearing mail. There's also survival of the fittest. This will increase all attributes by 6%. In addition, it reduces the chance you'll be critically hit by melee attacks by 6%, and most importantly, increases your armor contribution from cloth and leather items in bear form and dire bear form by 33%, which is a big number, actually. In addition to that, they also have thick hide, which brings up that armor contribution another 10%, so that is an additional 43% from talents, increasing their original leather armor value. Many argue, once again, this still leaves them short. However, druids also have a lot of agility on their gear, which gives druids a much higher dodge than the other tank classes, which is enhanced even more with talents like Feral Swiftness. This will increase your chance to dodge by 4%, and this combined with the passive damage mitigation of Savage Defense, which reduces the damage taken from the next physical attack that strikes you by 25% of your attack power anytime you deal a critical strike, and active ones like Bark Skin, which is essentially a 20% damage reduction, lasting 12 seconds with a 1-minute cooldown, as well as Survival Instincts, which we talked about. That's basically the equivalent of a Warrior's Last Stand, a 20% damage reduction. Druids actually have an absolutely ridiculous amount of abilities. I was losing my breath just trying to say them all. Druids have a ton in their kit, whether that's passive or active, so they really compensate for that lower armor with that large health pool, but all of those passives and active abilities, there's so many of them. Druids are truly a sponge for both damage, but also heals. They can drain their healers' mana more quickly than the other tank classes, though they do have Innervate, which can help with mana from pull to pull, and long boss fights, of course, would then be more draining on healers with a Druid tank. And I do want to mention that Druids might have a harder time in Icecrown Citadel because of the dodge debuff. When you're in the raid, it decreases dodge rating by 20%, so keeping that in mind as well. Feral Druids also have an ability at the end of the Feral tree called Berserk. This causes your Mangle to hit up to 3 targets and have no cooldown, reduces the energy cost of your cat form abilities by 50%, and you also are immune to Fear. So that is a nice bonus for Druids. Of course, there are even more passives I didn't talk about, such as Primal Tenacity, which also reduces the duration of Fear by 30% and reduces all damage taken while stunned by 30%. You can imagine Primal Tenacity being a very important talent for Druids. If you're stunned, you can't dodge, so that 30% damage reduction being very helpful in those types of scenarios. Protector of the Pack is another powerful passive, which reduces the damage you take by 12% just passively while in Bear or Dire Bear form. It's quite a good talent. And then, of course, we did talk about Survival Instincts, the Druids, equivalent to a Warrior's Last Stand, granting 30% of your maximum health for 20 seconds. Of course, Druids also have Feral Charge to get back to targets after being knocked back. And Druid off tanks also have the advantage that they can turn into cat form and help DPS the main tank's target after their target is killed. Kind of a unique ability to Druid tanks. Now let's move on to the ranking. Now many will argue that Ardent Defender is simply the best passive in the history of the game, and it rounds out Paladin tank to be the most overpowered tank in Wrath of the Lich King. I tend to agree with this. The talent provides Paladins with massive damage reduction and a second life passively, which can happen more than once if it happens between the span of 2 minutes. It's just too strong in my opinion. Death Knights have many incredible passives and active damage mitigations with self-heals, and Druids also have a ton of passives and actives damage mitigation abilities as well. So, I ranked Warriors as B because Warriors seem to require much more skill to be played at the level that other tanks can get just passively, just by choosing their class. Paladin, for example, has that Ardent Defender as a passive. DK takes reduced magic damage passively. Druids have a ton of powerful passives, and so on. But Warrior needs to be actively using many abilities and cooldowns to be as effective, which means you might run into more mediocre Warriors because not everyone has the skill to pull it off. Overall, though, like we said in the beginning with Blizzard's design philosophy, you should be able to have any class main tank, each with their own strengths and weaknesses and their own unique flavors. Hope you guys enjoyed this guide. I had a ton of fun learning more about Blizzard's game design philosophy for tanks and Wrath of the Lich King. If you want more videos like this, then don't forget to subscribe because more guides like this are coming. If you want to add anything to this, let me know in the comments below. Love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Until then, my name is Toyhouze, and take care.